Well, good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, I have had many roles and responsibilities in Black Hat throughout its history. It's the first time that my responsibility is to be Jeff Moss, which is not kind of easy. So I'm not Jeff, I'm Stefano, and along with me on the stage this evening, there's three of the board members that review the talks for this show, Anthony Lai, Lidia, Giuliano, and Vincenzo Iozzo. The objective of this session is to wrap up the show. So as you have noticed, we are here with our drink of choice, which is beer, in order to have a relaxed chat about what we found interesting in the show. But since we put together the show, it's kind of useless if we just talk to each other about what we found interesting. So what we want to do is this. There's two microphones in the hallways. Whenever you have a question or a remark about what we said, in particular, if you disagree with us, we would like to hear from you. So if I see you standing near the microphone, I will just shut up for a while and give you the open mic, and you can address us. Comments, questions, remarks, they are all equally welcome as long as they fit in this friendly discussion. We are trying to close this show together, so don't be shy and approach the mic at any point. Whenever you feel like it, just approach the mic, and I will know that I need to let you talk. Okay? So, I would like to welcome our panelists tonight. I feel like a TV show host. I wanted to do this all my life. So I would start with Vincenzo. What was the talk that you liked the most? Or that you found most interesting for whatever reason?
So, I found a bunch of them interesting, but the one I want to focus on is the last one I saw, which was done by Microsoft Research, somebody named, I think, Marina Simakov. So she was talking about using graph theory to figure out people trying to do lateral movements inside networks. And I think one of the reasons why that was particularly interesting is that there are two things. One is at Black Hat normally we see a lot of offensive stuff, but not as much quality defensive stuff. And I think trying to push more in that direction is important because a lot of the innovation these days is happening there. But then the second thing is we don't, I think we've got to a phase where we're starting to realize that if we have enough compute and if we use a little more computer science, we can actually do a lot from a defensive standpoint. And so there are two big trends that we can see from the defensive side. So one is using more compute to fudge stuff, and fuzzers since AFL came out have gone massively up in terms of results and just utilization and so on and so forth. And you can easily see how it has nothing to do with the sophistication of the fuzzer. It has everything to do with the amount of cores you have to throw at it. But then the other part is trying to use the massive amounts of telemetry data that you have from the various machines to understand what attackers are doing. And again, I think that talk was an example of just leveraging the data to do something interesting from a defensive standpoint.
Oh, yeah, that's actually a very interesting thing, and I think that we will see more of that coming up our sleeves in the next future. What about you? What was the one talk that attracted your attention?
Like Vincenzo, there was a lot that obviously stood out. Being someone who does a lot in defensive security, I was really interested to see some of the topics that were coming through, especially those that are releasing tools and obviously trying to help those that are stuck in the defensive world and obviously trying to battle the threats that are hitting the areas where we work. But there was one that I watched yesterday. It was a talk on wearables And the reason I really enjoyed this one was because when you look at IoT and hardware and the apps and the cloud and the device and all those bits and pieces, there's no really defined standard or even a guideline for people to work towards. There's lots of manuals on how to test, there's lots of manuals on how to do it, there's lots of manuals potentially how to exploit the hardware and the various components, but we're still yet to see something that people can work towards to start securing these wearables and these IoT devices, whatever it may be. And so what these researchers presented was sort of a framework broken down into each of these components, moving away from the old SDLC framework and focusing on privacy and security and breaking down all those different areas on how we can secure those bits and pieces more securely and when they work together with each other. So I really hope that the team publish it in some way. I think that hopefully we're going to see a lot more of that, that sort of publication working towards a standard and working towards some sort of framework so that we've got better IoT devices.
And that's actually a very interesting thing. I think that as the industry matures and as Black Hat grows beyond its original size, so it grows far beyond its original size, we embrace the community of defenders along with the community of offensive security people. And we are seeing and we need to see more content like that. So I actually agree. It's a great example. Anthony?
Actually, I like a lot of talks, and let me list one to two talks. Mm-hmm. First of all, today I found a top-class talk. Anyone go to our SGX talk?
Oh, that was great.
This is excellent, because when I attended the talk, I think SGX is awesome, perfect, looks like. You can't identify the key. Okay, you can get it. However, the researchers could find out, through the DRAM side channel, identify the role, the borders, and map with the physical address, and then through the frequency and the time use difference, and set up own timer to how to accelerate, to shorten, to simulate the real timer or in the system, and to find a signal, and to identify those 1 and 0 bits, and then get a key. I said, well, luckily, anyone get beacons? No. Before I got a lot of people, the exchange, the cryptocurrency exchange asked us whether the SGX is safe or not. But I could say after this talk, sorry, then you need to do something. Other than that, okay, we use SGX there's some TSX, they could have some kind of fix. But even you could use other side channel to use some kinds of time of check, time of use bugs, to do double fetch. In the code, you could run a DRM radio and then simply to cause the race condition and fetch the values. But however, I can't imagine even you have followed the vendors, the fix, you could still got other side channel or other some classical bugs, okay, TOC, TOU bugs. And other than that, I also got some 1 to 2 talks that are really good, like U-Bootkit, the author is here. From Tencent, and for the IoT device, because we got a lot of malware worms spread around in the last year. To cause router or a lot of IoT device down. So I found that the U-Bootkit could make, when you boot loader, I could inject some code inside, and you can't remove it. Then you could spread around without any signal or any indicators. This is a good research before the real attackers do it. This is a very impressive one. And then lastly is Ashley, is one of our review board members. She did very good case study with the Korean researchers. Got a very complete case for fraud case, different kinds of attack vectors. It's also one of my PhD study, research study and case study, research study in target attack analysis. So this free talk is quite amazing for that.
Awesome. Well, yeah, actually, I think that you identified two of the interesting trends. So one of the interesting trends is the fact that 2018, I think, has become the year where the hardware fell. Yeah. Because starting from the beginning of this year, everything that we believed to be safe or true has fallen. And the second thing is it's actually the one thing that made me curious about the program of this show, which is that with respect to what happened in USA last year, for instance, we received slightly less interest in IoT devices security. There was less submissions, and at the end, less selected submissions on that. So I have the impression that we have not actually solved that problem. I have this distinct impression. So since we have not solved it, I am wondering why people do not really submit for that. Probably because we don't have solutions, so that's the reason people are still thinking. But that's the thing that struck me as odd. And I also went to the U-Boot Kit talk. It was interesting, but it was kind of isolated in our program.
But I mean, this connects back to that conversation we were having about the sort of like split between a small segment of software and like the bigger, the bigger picture of like what the software out there looks like in terms of security. And like, I think there are a couple of interesting things there. One is, again, to praise the vendors. There is like, I would say from 2014 to today, the code quality of like the major operating systems and browsers and so on and so forth has gone up massively, which among other things implies that we have a way, like we know how to actually secure massive amounts of code that are shipped fairly frequently and are used by millions of people. And again, part of it is using more cores. Like part of it is you have a bunch of fuzzers, you start fuzzing things, and so on and so forth. A lot of those lessons have not trickled down to IoT, it seems. And I would bet that some of it, again, is like if you look at commodity software, like if you look at the Windows kernel or like Chrome, it is fairly easy to orchestrate automation. It's fairly easy to use state-of-the-art compilers and so on and so forth. That's not true for IoT. So I think part of what it is about IoT is that it's not that we've solved the problem, is that the research community kind of knows what the solution is. It's just more of a industry effort to try to get where we should be. Whereas I think in the past that wasn't really clear. And I think like if you look at it in terms of like waves, I think there was the wave of awareness. So making sure that everyone was aware of the fact that these IoT devices are very vulnerable. And I think we've sort of covered that. But then the next wave is not, oh, we need to research necessarily ways to make them safer. I think there is the basic like security line of we need to make sure that they get up to the normal standards for like what secure software looks like. And that's not a research problem necessarily. That's literally like you get to work.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. I am kind of divided on that because there is a couple of research issues there. I in general agree. I mean, it's a matter of standards, but there's a few research issues in there regarding, for instance, the fact that these things have limited memory footprints, so allocation of memory is different than on regular operating systems. There's a few things that probably we need to think about. The other thing is that we are not providing those things that we learned in a format that can be used by embedded system developers.
Yeah, I've got a big different take on it, I think, as well, is that I think that we may not be seeing anything, we may not have seen a lot this submission, but I think they're coming. I really think they're coming. I think that we've got a lot of developers working on it, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a lot in USA. I know a lot of people that are actually working on their own research at the moment. It probably won't be ready until potentially 2018. But if I can use that teddy bear example that we were talking about today, I think that as well as just the underlying OS problems and the implementation problems, there's an example that I once heard, and I think it's just a great example that if you have two IoT dolls, teddy bears as an example, and one has security embedded and it costs $30 and the other one doesn't have security embedded and it's $10, which one are you going to buy? You're going to buy the cheaper one. And how do you influence that market? When you're a parent and you want to get a cute, cuddly teddy bear for your child, you're going to get something that's affordable, that is within the family budget. And if PII data is being leaked over an unencrypted link or those sorts of things, you don't care because your child's happy. So it's rush to market, it's the requirements. Security is an unseen finance that a lot of people don't want to put in their budget, and that's another whole separate discussion. So there's a bunch of challenges, not just from a programmatic perspective, but also a requirements perspective of what the customer wants and that rush to market.
We are probably being too mild and kind because nobody's disagreeing with us. So try to throw some provocative thoughts. Anthony, Vincenzo, some provocative thoughts.
You mean IoT things?
Guys, this was just a cue. We also want to hear from you. So if you have questions or remarks, just remember, stand up, get close to the mic, and we will be happy to talk with you. But until that point, we just need to generate noise on our own. So,
well, so in terms of more noise,
you're a great noise generator. Go ahead, white noise generator.
I'm amazing at it. If somebody needs a new way to generate randomness, ping me. Anyway, no. So what I was going to say is, while it's true that we've seen a sort of new set of attacks on CPUs, and so just we're starting to trust hardware less on the one end. I think the other thing for, not necessarily Black Hat, but this year and the past couple of years is actually we've seen secure enclaves and secure code processors getting much better. And the one thing that I wanted to mention is, I don't know if you guys use cryptocurrencies at all, but there is this wallet called Ledger S or something, which is like an hardware wallet. There was a bug published in their stuff recently, but that raised a bigger discussion in terms of the design of that wallet. And the design is actually quite interesting because it's one of the few commodity hardware things where the secure coprocessor actually verifies the integrity of the non-secure processor, or rather of the firmware that runs that is not supposed to be secure, which has one of the results is that you can actually trust what you see on the display. And the engineering choices there were really interesting because basically one of the ways they do that is they make sure that the memory available on the device is not big enough to store more than one firmware. This way you can always verify that basically there isn't something else running that is feeding you the wrong checksum. But this is interesting for two reasons. One is I think we're making massive progress there, and we're probably getting closer to a point where we can actually have trustworthy devices for well-defined limited tasks, but we can have them, which is more than we can say for the past 30 years. But then the second thing is that a lot of that research is not coming out from the usual avenues. We didn't see that research, and partially because the cryptocurrency community industry, whatever you want to call it, is while also speculating and probably losing people a lot of money, is also generating very interesting research from the point of view of living in a sort of untrustable environment and what do you do there. And I think that's another interesting trend that it's happening that I wish will capture more in the next few editions of Vegas or whatever.
Yep, no, definitely. And one of the things that actually makes me wonder is, as you said, the fact that we don't see that much research on cryptocurrencies coming through at Black Hat, which may be that the community is different.
I think the community is...
That's kind of worrying, because it means that the community of security scientists is not there, and that's not a good sign in either direction.
So I think a good chunk of people that do actually interesting stuff in cryptocurrencies are cryptographers, and cryptographers historically have been sort of like less represented at Black Hat than like other security disciplines. But again, like I think that research, while it's not applicable to the day-to-day job of most of us, I think it's interesting from sort of like a longer-term perspective, and like zero-knowledge proofs and like secure hardware tokens for like limited tasks are eventually going to come to this side of the house, because you will start using them for like a different kind of 2FA or like some other factor authentication and so on and so forth. So I think it would be important for our community and our side of academia to sort of like reach out to that side and vice versa and try to have a dialogue, because at the same time they're struggling with some of the problems we know how to solve. So they're struggling with coordinated disclosure, just struggling with how do you make actual software more secure. So it's an interesting situation there. But yeah.
Anthony, you had some...
For me then, I have the experience, actually my folks and I have experience to rebuild the wallet, all right, and also the cryptocurrency smart contract. So you know why we are we want to rebuild, because first of all, it's a new thing. At the same time, it's all about program. So when we rebuild the wallet, like Android application, you say it's from Miranda, they said they already implement all of the control, like encryption, whatever. But however, when you do like use the tool like MockSF, I would like to echo the Zanero, the MockSF. It's quite good too, all right? We use the MockSF to do a really, really simple to take a run to analyze the application. Hey, your some kind of passcode on ping test, and you get backup files, configuration files are over there. And you could run the application in a jailbroken machine. They don't know. They simply say, hey, I just want to make the transaction. Why you make me trouble? Looks like cause them trouble. They pay us for the pen testing, but it looks like they ask for trouble. But anyway, they take a lesson. I said, if other guys to put it like that, you will on the headline. All right? The smart contract thing is, I attend a session, but looks like the session is not really new thing, but it's a good topic for review of the smart contract security. But how can we imagine a good programs? And I want to introduce a good research paper from Dr. Daniel Liu. It's about how to patch the bytecode to do the efficiency of the smart contract for Ethereum. And you could see sometimes the smart contract, if you have some redundant code or some bad code, it will cause some denial of service, or increase or decrease the efficiency. So that's why not just write the program to implement the transaction. We need to like a code review as usual. This should bring a process. So that's why the previous David Wong, for the previous session, they will issue to publish the top 10 of the smart contract of the security. So I appreciate it. So that's why we need to communicate with the cryptocurrency community more closely. This is why we need to push it. Otherwise, they will suffer another issue. Yeah.
Okay. And
controversial topics.
Yes, sure.
So I might just
that's what we want.
Deviate
that's
a little
what
bit.
we need.
I imagine that we'll probably see a lot more in the AI and ML space. I know we all have comments around that. It's a bit of an interest of mine.
Let me grab a drink because I
grab a drink. Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of an interest of mine because for those that know, I did a lot of research last year on agents that claim to do machine learning, and I guess I'm really looking forward to some of the research that's coming through, having a look at the data that's being used to get the ML, up to speed and just understanding what's what. I won't claim that I'm an expert between structured and unstructured data, but there's lots of really interesting stuff. Some of the things that I've found, if we want to be controversial, is that if someone's claiming to state that with a piece of malware or whatever it is that it's absolutely going to learn on the fly. Just check it out. It's not always what it seems. Some of it's still signature update. Some of it's done in a different way. So I think we're still going to see a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of that coming through the pipeline, and there's a lot of research happening. A lot of people doing their own projects. It's definitely not a new area. ML's been around for probably the last 15 years. It's just gaining a lot of limelight, I think, at the moment.
It has certainly been around for the
A long
last
time.
15 years, because in 2004 I was speaking about that at Black Hat in my first Black Hat talk. So it has been around for a little bit of time.
Well, the reason I say that was because I know we were talking about this over lunch. One of my first jobs was I was a kernel developer for the Department of Defence, and we were actually doing AI then, and we were actually taking network packets and trying to use AI to figure out what was an intrusion,
right.
What constitutes an intrusion, and it wasn't with signature based, it was with the data that was coming in. So it's great to see that it's being used for good. Like I'm seeing not just in science or in security, but all sorts of programs. I'm seeing fertility. I'm seeing all sorts of avenues where it's actually going to do some good. So I'm excited to see what's coming.
And to be fair, I mean, like, it has been around for a long time, but like in the past, I don't know, probably 6-7 years, there has been like some novelty in two forms. One is clearly more data. More data in like it's easier to actually collect the data and store the data and so on and so forth. But then the other one is more like we got better at doing gradient descent. That it's actually important if you want to do learning. And but I think so. I think one of the reasons why we don't see as much in security, or like we don't see as much like good machine learning in security, is that a lot of that's like a lot of the new research has been done in like neural networks and deep learning and so on and so forth, which doesn't, like, it's not as easy to use in security as it would be in like other fields. That being said, like there is a lot of like new stuff coming down the pipeline in terms of not from a security standpoint, but in terms of like better ways to do like to have approximation of algorithms that you need in order to be able to use effectively machine learning. And yes.
We have a question. That's thanks.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the IoT discussion. And I do agree that there's a significant gap, and the market research is really nascent when it comes to IoT and wearable security. One of the fundamental problem is there are a number of protocols being used, like almost 60 or 70. We actually spoke about this in our presentation yesterday, but the fundamental problem is that there is no standard or a central framework to secure these protocols. So the fundamental problem arises with the way the wearables communicate. What is your take on solving this problem, or a standard for wearable security when it comes to communication when they use different protocols? Like I think some of the articles even state that there are over 100 protocols being used today.
That's a kind of a difficult question. Who wants to tackle it?
Well, so I think it's two parts, right? So there's the like security of the device, and then there's the security of the data that goes through the device. And I think those are like equally important problems. I think I see this in like a lot. So let me take a step back. I think the problem with IoT right now in general is the fact that it's still very proprietary in nature. And so everyone tries to reinvent the wheel in some way or the other. And when you look at networks or of like software vendors or like security vendors and whatnot that have their own like proprietary stack, in a sense, it looks as messy as the protocols used by IoT devices, because there is a perverse set of incentive whereby if you are the software architect, you probably get paid more if you come up with some way to benchmark your protocol that shows that your protocol is faster than whatever was there before. So I think that the sort of like longer term solution would be to have standardized open source protocols that are used by everyone. And I think that will happen the moment people figure out how to monetize IoT without necessarily have to rely on the fact that the code is proprietary. So I think there is that part. And then the second part is more technical in nature, which is to do proper software security on a lot of these devices. You need to have ways to emulate them properly because you can't really fudge or do unit testing, reliable unit testing on the devices themselves. So you need to have a way to virtualize these things and ideally have server farms where you can just spawn 10,000 instances of one specific type of IoT device and fudge that for, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and so on and so forth, and sort of rinse and repeat every time you need to release a new version. So I think there is that bit of technical problem, but that has less to do with protocols and there's more to do with, okay, once we figure out how these things are going to communicate and we know that they are secure, how do we make sure that the code is actually good? But I think the protocol part, I don't think it's a technical problem, personally.
Yeah, I do agree with your argument, and I think in the process of customizing these protocols, every vendor, every OEM tries to customize, for instance, let's just say Bluetooth, right? There's the spec, the definition of the spec itself, but everybody tries to customize it to meet their own needs. And I feel like in the process of customizing it to suit that particular use case, I think there are more number of vulnerabilities being introduced just because there are a lot of open-ended questions. There are a lot of areas that could leave, ambiguous design, and that results in a lot more vulnerabilities being introduced as part of the design phase itself. So I think, as a security community, there's a need to address that problem.
I'm going to ask the questions. Sure. Can I ask you questions or everyone questions? Everyone updates your home router firmware in the recent 6 months? Just raise your hand, please, then. Okay, how the guys is sleeping? No, are leaving the room. First of all, even among our security community, not everyone. For me, I didn't update it. Because first of all, when it's updated, my family would complain, hey, it's over operation. We need to maintain the 7 times 24 hours. What are you doing right now? My mother say, hey, I'm checking out the Facebook. You update it? Please put it in a sleeping time. Mom, okay, I'm sorry. And brother, hey, I'm doing homework. Please do not update the router. Okay. It pushed me frustrated. So that's why even we are a security community, we can't do it, the security operation easily. Then we are better to educate. First of all, it's an easy one-click. Other than Amazon one-click purchase, we need to have a one-click security defense or update. First of all, they need a lazy button, put, okay. Then we could update it, the firmware. Otherwise, they would say, hey, I simply replace it. I don't know whether I could know the worms or the IoT is vulnerable until I see the newspaper. Oh, my router is vulnerable. That's it. And sometimes the police lock the door. Oh, my router is spreading worms. They just know by that moment. So we need to push the education or the prevention, other vendors, security community, to the public education as well, to make it more friendly for the update security patch or the cycle, right? This is, I think, more critical for that.
Yeah, it's always not just about also educating, because practically if you, for instance, take a smart camera, right? How easy is it for a user who is probably not technical or not even into security, or even if it is somebody who is technical, it's not every day that you go and check if your smart camera has an update, right? So I think, that's also a problem. Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thanks. Actually, in response to one of the things that was just said, I think that there's an interesting area that is very underdeveloped. So there was a, a research paper released more in the scientific community by Falcon, Momot, and Sergei Bratus and a few other people analyzing this problem, which I think is fascinating. How does the complexity of protocols that are developed affect their security? So many of the protocols we have are very difficult to parse. If you want to build a parser, they are very difficult to build. So they kind of put into relation the fact that if we want to have devices, for instance, that are more secure, when we design their protocols, we should not just take into account the functionalities we want, but also how complex we are making the parser for the person that is going to write it. Because if that protocol that we develop becomes a standard, then we are imposing a standard that other people are going to try to implement, and their implementation is going to be flawed. So that's an area that I think is interesting, and I was reminded of it while we were discussing these questions. Okay, so we have still a few minutes. So while we wait for other people to have the bravery to stand up.
Yeah, I have a question for the audience, which is, how many of you are concerned that your job will disappear because of automation?
That's a good question. Nobody.
Interesting.
You guys are optimists.
So,
or pessimists, depending on the point of view.
Which one of you wants to say why? Okay, next question. How many of you are concerned that your job will disappear because actually defense is getting much better, and so at some point people will come to you and say, look, I don't need to have all these people looking after my perimeter or whatever it is because I trust software vendors enough. Or they have free add-ons that I can use to have a basic level of security.
Well, I wouldn't raise my hand either.
There's one. Okay. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
Good man.
So that's an interesting question. I would probably half raise my hand for that because when I'm talking to companies and vendors, I think the perception that they are more secure now than they have been before, that is going up, even though they may not be. So when I speak to vendors, I get the feedback that they've been doing security now, when they had not been doing before, so they're good. But where actually there are still many areas that once we dive in deeper, there are problems, right? So many of the people, they say, we already have a security team, we have been doing security, so we are good, thank you. So that's something new that I have been seeing.
I'd answer that if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
I personally don't think, and I hope, that it won't happen. Mainly because obviously that's something I do day in, day out, and I think that if we think that our product from a vendor is going to solve everything, I just don't think that that's practical. Because in every day when I'm doing defence, if we don't have a separate set of eyes, it's that people factor, that cultural factor, that mindset factor to think differently. We're the ones that on the ground that sadly look at, whatever, not sadly, but look at all those logs and all those anomalies, and you're able to say, it's the human factor that looks at that and says, that just doesn't look right. A lot of the vendor tools and the products that are available, they can't do it. They can make our jobs easier, and they can automate things for us to make, the time to look through logs and files. Obviously, we can reduce that time, but to me, it's still the people factor that we absolutely need that. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon.
We have a question.
Okay, good.
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm from Luxembourg. I work for the National Emergency Response Team there. And first question, if you compare security now and 20 years ago, is it really more secure? Big doubts. My job is secured. I will probably, as a security engineer, have a very nice pension.
It's always nice that we put the word security in job security, so that's...
See? That's how to keep positive. What I am really worried is that states are sort of waking up that this computer thing is sort of a thing. And if you consider that we are seriously talking whether states should weaken security, take a look what Apple did, gave the keys to the Chinese government. After on Black Hat USA, they show this great presentation where they take a blender and they just mix the fucking master keys, which is just a charade, which is ridiculous, and you should be very suspicious about that. I worry about that. And this is out of my hands. I can't really do anything about that. So perhaps you want to get a take on that. Should we worry?
Oh. So nice.
Go on, Cisco routers that got opened. What's the code in your BIOS? All the stuff that is closed source, and that's scary.
Let's start from the first question. How many people in this room, I know that I'm going to shoot myself in the foot, how many people in this room were already in security 20 years ago? Just me? Oh, okay.
Just.
Okay, good. So, how many people in this room that were in security 20 years ago think that our current security level, as in risk level, has gone down or security level has gone up? Choose your poison. Anybody?
But can sorry.
20 years ago,
No, 20 years ago I was like 5, so not 5, but something like that. No. I wasn't going to say 20 years ago. I knew the answer to that. No, but I think that's not the right question to pose, because I think the right question is not has the level of risk gone up or down. I think the question is are like the things we use more secure? And yes, at the same time, the level of risk hasn't gone down because people pay more attention to it. So like I don't think they are like the same question.
No, they are not the same question, but the real question is about the level of risk, right?
Fair enough.
Not the intrinsic level of security, because the intrinsic level of security cannot really be defined. What matters is how safe your data or your use of computation is. And I totally agree with you.
Yes.
We have devices and programs that are much better than they were. We have techniques that are much, much better than they were. But at the same time, we have more determined attackers. There's more value in the things that we are using, and there's more reliance of the society on those things. And there's also, as the second question asked, there's also a kind of a keen interest of large players such as governments into sometimes undermining that security. So,
I don't think the risk has gone down. I mean, 15 years ago I was in finance. Has that data changed? Probably not. Has the infrastructure changed? Definitely not. But I think the level of awareness has gone up. And I think that's helping people put better controls in place. It's because they understand things a lot better. I know we've got another question.
So we have a couple of minutes for a first question, and then we can go to a closing.
I was just going to say that 25 years ago, I had to ask a major email vendor why their SMTP mail server was a default open relay. you know, the threats have changed. The landscape has changed. But you know, there's still this very optimistic sense that people have that things are going to work. And you know, as somebody who works in the security space, we're constantly reminding people that they have to put multiple layers of defense in depth, because no matter how optimistic you are about your edge router or your edge firewall, you need internal levels of security as well, and you know, I will say that to customers at least once a week.
That's a hard-learned lesson, and which I agree a lot with. Thank you very much. So, just in closure, since we have like a few seconds each, any last take, any closing remarks, Anthony?
For me, first of all, if you guys very dependent on the render products and want to sleep well, I could say no. Because first of all, like WannaCry, anyone hit by WannaCry? Or encrypted, successful encrypt or pay the money? No? No pay the money? Oh, you're good, okay. First of all then, other than depends on product, you wait for their feedback signature. You could do a lot of manual work, resignation, your manual research with the papers, and find out the workaround. And if you just depend on it, you will make a very bad luck day. So maybe better to enhance your kung fu, your skills, all right, with the papers. If your head here, the research on all your security head here, get a person to do research. Not the person with the admin, operation, fix the refrigerator, air conditioner, but please do the research. This is my words for that, okay?
Okay. Again, I just want to thank everyone that submitted this year. For us, it's a real honour to read everybody's submission. So my last closing words is if you are working on something or you're working on some research, whether you think it's great or not or cutting edge, and you want to have a go, definitely submit. Have a listen to the Death by 1,000 abstracts. There's lots of advice on how to submit to the review board. We absolutely love to hear from you. If you want any of us to review it beforehand, we're absolutely here to help you along the way. So hope to see some of your work next year.
I surely second that.
Yep.
Vincenzo?
Just to answer the second question, I think, yes, we should worry in the sense that everything that doesn't scale will be probably less secure by government mandate. Then how does that impact you as a company? I would posit that it doesn't impact you as much as that impact you as an individual. I would posit it impacts you a lot. I don't think there is anything you can do about it. I think the only thing you can do is try to make sure that it's only the stuff that doesn't scale that gets weakened, not everything. But yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining us in this discussion and to the people that have shared their thoughts with us. And thank you very much for being at Black Hat this year. We appreciate your patience with us and have a nice evening here in beautiful Singapore.
Thank you so much.